welcome everybody, and let's begin today's discussion on SOPs and LORs. For most of the discussion, we will talk about SOPs because most of you are interested in the SOPs. Maybe at the end, I'll cover a little bit about LORs, that is letters of recommendations also. Anytime during this discussion, if you have any questions, just feel free to um, turn on your microphones and ask your questions. Or if you have anything that you would like to just type it, you could put it in the message box and we will discuss those questions as well. Okay. So welcome once again. And so now let's begin. Now, before we begin, right? So what is an SOP? So that is the first thing that I would like to discuss. I mean, what do you define as an SOP? Because you will find a lot of definitions around on the web if you search on what are SOPs, and that sometimes gets a little confusing. So, but this is what your SOP should contain. I mean, this is more like describing your SOP. Your SOP should basically be a statement or an essay that talks about your career goals or future aspirations. It should discuss the important educational and work experiences that you have, and those which have prepared you for these goals, and why do you want to apply to that particular university. That is, what are your reasons for applying to that particular university. This is what, in summary, an SOP should contain. So if someone has to be write a definition of SOP, this is what the definition of an SOP is. Again, now when I'm talking of an SOP, I'm having this discussion specifically in terms of a master's application SOP. There are, if you're applying for an undergrad program, it could be a slightly different thing. If you're applying for a PhD or an MBA program, it could be slightly different. But in general, a master's SOP should contain these aspects. Okay. So let's get a little deeper into what should be the content of an SOP. I mean, you should use your SOP to basically discuss first thing. I mean, you should talk about your careers and your interests and goals. This is the kind of thing that generally when I see SOPs, right, this aspect is often missing in most SOPs. Most SOPs talk a lot about what they have done in their undergrad or what they have done in their past life. Very few people, students actually talk about their future interests and goals. So this is something that you should definitely highlight in your SOP. That is, what are your future interests and goals? Talk about what have been your accomplishments and achievements, right? You describe what skills you have gained, what knowledge you have garnered over the whole, maybe during your undergrad, or maybe if you are working, then during your work. uh, Most important to give examples. I mean, the SOP is not just going to be a statement of where you talk about, okay, I know this, I'm so and so person, I have learned this kind of thing. Try to give examples that substantiate what you have learned, uh, what mistakes you have made. Everything should be backed with some good examples. Otherwise, it becomes more like a very generic statement. If you don't have an SOP which talks, and when I say example, these are not going to be examples from picked up from somewhere. These are your personal life examples, specifically relating to the program that you are applying to. Similarly, you can use the SOP to address your weaknesses and drawbacks. But again, this is something which I don't, unless you have a very strong drawback or some weakness in your profile, you need not get to that point or in the SOP. Sometimes some universities provide space to write an additional essay. So you could use you could use the additional essay to talk about your weakness or drawback. If not, you could write a small paragraph about it in your SOP. And then again, most importantly, mm, you should write about what is your interest in that particular program that you are applying to. Now, so and yeah, when most of the times what happens is students ask a very specific question: is should I make my SOP different for every university, right? So I would say at least 80% of your SOP can be the same. Where unless you are applying to completely different programs, like for example, if you are applying to a say a MS in computer science program, you are also applying for an MS in engineering management program or an MIS program, then yes, your SOPs might vary. But if you are applying to say an MS in computer science program at multiple universities, most of the contents of your SOP can be same. At least the part where you discuss your interests, career goals, your accomplishments and all that can be same. The part where you talk about why are you applying to this particular university and this particular program might will have to change definitely. But as I said, 80% of it could be same, and you could only customize it to the university based on the university's program. And of course, if they have some specific requirements for the SOP, you could probably include those as well. Okay. Another thing to remember is that the SOP is not a prose version of your resume. In the sense, the SOP is not something where you are actually just completely describing your resume in a paragraph format. Okay, so this is not, the university will be looking at your resume and they would be looking at your SOP as well. So both of them have to be completely different. They could be talking about the same project, same uh, the work that you have done, but it should not be that okay, this is what the resume and the SOP are just okay. In the resume you have put it as bullet points, whereas in the SOP you just have removed the bullet points and written it as a paragraph. That is not how it should be. For those who join later, at any point you have any questions about the SOP or whatever I'm saying, just feel free to interrupt me and ask your question. Just turn on your microphones and you could ask the questions, or you could just put it in the message box, the chat box of Google Meet, and we will discuss those maybe right now or later. Okay. Coming to the next point. Okay. Now, the most, I would not say the difficult part, but the part where most students struggle a lot is your introduction of the SOP. Now, what do you say? What do you write as an introduction? And I have seen a lot of introductions where either students start with quotes, or they start with some you know uh, probably they start with some childhood incidents on typically where they write on, for example, if you are applying for a program in computer science, right? So then students would start about how basically they got interested in computer science when they saw someone at home working on the laptop or playing video games and all that. So childhood stories, um, which apparently often are not very relevant childhood stories. Sometimes students start with general discussions about the industry or where the uh, probably technology is headed, or those kind of stories. Uh, but what I would suggest is avoid all these three. I mean, one is you have to keep in mind that the reader of your SOP is going to be a faculty at a university, at the university that you are applying. So what would they be interested in? I mean, the only reason that they, I mean, before we get to what should be the introduction of the SOP, let me just talk a little bit about a few points. The first being that the reason why they ask you about the for the SOP is not to judge your writing skills, or not to judge your. This is not like an essay writing competition like you had in school, right? Write an essay where you are graded on the language, or how nice your essay is, kind of thing, right? So this is not exactly the SOP. Is more the reason why they I mean the department or the universities ask for the SOPs is they want to know more about you as a student. So the SOP should provide them insights into your background rather than talking about general stuff. Now, the second thing that you should know about the understand about the SOP is that the SOP is not a story. I mean, often if you see um, on the internet, if you search, you will find a lot of discussion about SOPs. And one of the things that where this whole discussion generates is that in the US, undergrad program admission students also have to write an SOP. Now, when you're applying for a bachelor's program in the US, the SOP is completely different, because when you're in the 12th grade and then you're applying, often you haven't done anything related to the program that you're applying to. For example, if you are a student who is interested in, say, a mechanical engineering program, or maybe a program in economics, or whatever it is, as a bachelor's degree, it is quite possible that as a student in your 12th grade, you haven't taken even a single course in mechanical engineering or economics or whatever, right? Or maybe you have just studied one course in economics. So you can't frame your SOP at that point on the entire, on the fact that why are you interested in economics, what has been your background in economics, and all those kind of stuff. Most students applying for a computer science program have rarely studied computer science at the 12th level. So in that case, you can't. So your SOP at that moment is more of what kind of a student you are, what have been your extracurriculars, how do you differentiate between you and another student, and that is where the concept of storytelling comes into place. But since most of the articles on the web, if you search, traditionally have been written with that audience in mind. When people started writing about SOPs, when especially international students or people who started writing about articles on international students masters application SOPs, they really didn't know where to look for. And then the obvious thing is, you do a Google search, those articles come up. You start, okay, you don't want to copy and paste, but you take content from that, and then you start framing articles. So a lot of SOP articles that you'll find on the net will tell you that the SOP is a story. I kind of don't agree to it. I can maybe share some references of links written by professors at Masters Universe programs, telling what do they look for in an SOP. There are some, you can Google out that, and that will give you a better idea on what faculty at Masters programs look for in a SOP of a Masters or a PhD student. Okay. So the first thing that they are not interested is your childhood stories, right? Because they really don't care whether you are, say, for example, if you're a computer science graduate and applying for a master's in computer science, honestly, the professor really doesn't care whether you picked up computer science because you were forced to by your parents, or because you were really genuinely interested in computer science right from childhood, or it could be whatever reasons. I mean, that was the only thing available in the college that you wanted to go to, right? So you don't have to make up stories of why you developed an interest in computer science right from childhood and all that blah 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 stuff. What you need to tell them is how good, or what they are interested in is how good are you student in computer science. I mean, you have done a complete bachelor's degree, which is almost 4 years of studying computer science. So even if you leave out the first common year and all that, at least 3 years of computer science subjects, how good are you as a computer science student is what they are interested in learning. So keep the SOP focused on um, the things that you have done in your bachelor's or beyond that. I mean, if you have work experience, then obviously talk about the work experience, but bachelor's, internships, work experience. So your SOP should be focused on that. That is the first thing that I would say. The second thing is, don't write about generic stuff, and maybe I'll discuss this more in detail. But when I say generic stuff, in the sense, as I said, the reader is going to be a faculty in the department. So you don't have to tell this person what kind of advancements are happening in computing today, and why do you want to go, and that should not be ideally a reason for probably going for a master's. Yeah, you cannot say that, okay, AI and machine learning are making significant inroads in the retail sector and finance and so technologies. They know that, right? They know it. They are working on it day in and day out. They know it much better than you. In fact, you are going there to learn from them. So there is no point in telling them about what technology has advanced, what advancements technology has made in so and so thing. Or if, for example, if you're writing about business analytics, maybe an SOP for analytics, right? You don't have to tell them what analytics can do or what is analytics and all that. That those kind of introductions generally make a good magazine article, right? Because when you're writing a magazine article or a newspaper article, the reader is slightly generic. They are not, everybody in the reader pool is aware of what analytics is, so they're setting context. Writing about what analytics is makes sense. But when you're writing an SOP, don't write it as a magazine article, as if you're writing a magazine article. That is not how it is. By writing one page, or sorry, not one page, even one paragraph on what analytics is, or what computer science or AI is, or what maybe advancements in robotics technologies are happening, you are just wasting space and telling the reader something that they already know. Okay. So use the introduction as a method to, either one is the most simple way is to just talk about your career goals. Keep it point blank, saying that this is what I'm interested in, these are my career goals, and I feel that a master's degree from so and so university will help me achieve those career goals. You could keep it as simple and short as that. That is a very straightforward way, tried and tested, safe way. Okay. Um, Another thing that if you want to talk about how those interests develop, right? For example, if you are saying that maybe I'll the next slide I'll show you one example. If you are saying that I am interested in AI and machine learning, what made you interested in AI and machine learning? And this experience or this story rather, so it is. I mean, I would still say it is a story, but you can't keep it a very generic story where you're talking about a story that is picked up from some. I mean, you can't say that you saw iPhone's new feature, so and so XYZ feature, which uses AI and some machine learning technology, and that is what made you interested in, uh, you know, AI and machine learning. The problem with that is, first thing is, you're talking about something that you have not really worked on, and if you can say that, anybody else can say that too, right? So your experiences should be more personalized, right? Talking about a generic event happening in the world, say iPhone launching a new phone cannot be, and with so and so features, cannot be your motivation for doing a master's, because if you say that, somebody else can also say that, right? Mm, Probably. uh, so talk about a incident. If you want to tell a story, tell about an incident, say maybe describing something that you did at work, maybe during an internship, during a project, maybe some problem that you encountered, something that you solved, and how that has motivated you to learn a little more about that particular technology or that particular domain. That can be your way of starting an SOP. You could talk about your personality as well, uh, but sometimes that may not always apply to all programs, especially people who work in the social sector, political sector, maybe a little bit in the business domain and all that. You might be able to blend in how your personality is more suited for that kind of a program, giving traits of where have you used your personality traits. But that may not always work for people who are applying to tech or STEM related master's programs. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, if not, we'll just quickly look at one particular introduction. uh, One of them, I mean, here basically talks about, if you read this, if you guys can read this, you can say, just 1 minute, hold on. Can you come and sit here? Sit here. Yeah, sorry, the dog is not really enjoying the discussion, so she started getting a little restless. Yeah. So this is, for example, one particular incident. Hey, 1 minute. Angel, come and sit here. Sit down. Down, down. So sorry. The dog is a little restless. Josna, can you just take her and to your room? Yeah.
Huh, okay, one second.
Yeah. Fine. Um, so this is one particular example that we were talking about, where the student is talking about his interest in AI and machine learning. But if you see, he has tried to blend in his and how that interest developed by talking about an example about using AI and machine learning in developing test cases, or rather automation test cases, which he probably experienced as an intern and while working full time in the industry. So this kind of a storytelling is good. I mean, where you're trying to bring in an example from your past, and saying that, okay, this is how I developed an interest, rather than saying that, okay, you read about some article or you read a book or you read some paper or something like that, and that is how you developed an interest. That may not always make a very strong story or make a very good impact. Another thing that I mean, so okay, if you're talking about reading a paper, you can still say that. But then, okay, after you read that paper, what did you do? I mean, maybe you started researching more, you probably took up a project based on that paper, you tried to implement that paper. Something on those lines would always be good. Merely coming across an article or reading some book or talking about some uh, saying that I attended a lecture or I saw a video lecture of so and so professor doing an online course and all that may not always be a very strong example of starting your SOP, or may not become a very strong story. Stories should be more personalized and very closely tied to your personal experience. So basically, I mean, I'll put it this way again, once again, if your SOP can be picked up by someone, or your introduction can be picked up by someone else, and it fits in that other person's profile also, that would typically make a weak introduction. So faculty, professors, or the department heads who are reading your SOP are going to look at how personalized it is. That is one thing. And what and so it also gives the student, I mean, it also gives them that impression that yes, this person can make correlations, probably can generate, I mean, has a good understanding of where AI and machine learning can be implemented. He has worked on it in the past. So that kind of somehow helps them understand that, okay, and it also helps you maybe differentiate yourself from the rest of the applicants. Uh, in another example, for that matter, um, now this is a story, okay, but this is a story again where the applicant, he or she is talking about an incident that happened maybe while working. I mean, at work. This kind of an introduction. I mean, this I haven't put in. I mean, in this today's presentation, I don't have the entire SOP here, but this is more like setting the stage for a good example of an SOP for an engineering management program. Well, on that note, I have me and Josna have written a book on MS in US applications. Some of you might have a copy of it. It's a free downloadable book, but if you just if you want it, you can just send me or Josna WhatsApp message, and we'll mail it to you, message it to you, the PDF copy of it. That has a complete chapter on writing SOPs, and it also has some exam sample SOPs, writing around 10 15 sample SOPs. So this is there in the book. So if you want to read the entire SOP, you can, maybe after this discussion is over, you can probably either download it or just WhatsApp me, and I'll message you the copy, and you can, or I'll just put it in the group that we are on. Most of you are there on that group, so I'll put it there. And all these copies of, I mean, samples of SOPs are there in that book as well. Okay. So here the student is talking about an incident. So this is more like, this is the kind of storytelling that if you want to get into the storytelling more, then you can talk about such stories where you're bringing in stories from, or examples from work, and that to more recent examples, where you're saying that, okay, this is what this is good for, an SOP, that where you want to write about your interest in analytics or engineering management, those kind of things. So you're building up a story for that. Alternatively, if you want to, probably just be very focused, you could start something like this, saying that these are my career goals. This is what I want to do in the future, and that is why I want to pursue a master's in business analytics, or any program for that matter. So this is a very direct way of starting an SOP. Some universities, right, in the SOP, they ask you a very direct question only. I mean, so it is always good before you start working on, and especially for business related programs, right? Sometimes they may not have an SOP, but they may have an essay in place of an SOP, which is almost similar. But they would ask you a question saying that, what are your career goals? What important experiences from your past have do you think have prepared you for such goals? And how will the master's program at our university help you achieve these goals? This is the question that they ask you for the SOP, and then sometimes they'll give you a word limit of, say, 1,000 words, 700 words to write the SOP or write the essay. So if they have a very specific question for the SOP which clearly says, please state your career goals and the rest of it, then you could write an SOP that actually starts with, these are my career goals. Okay. Any questions so far that anybody might have on this topic? Anything related to SOPs or what we have discussed so far? Okay. If no questions, we will go forward. So again, continuing with the framework of the SOP, um, start with an introduction. Then talk about what educational and work experiences that you have. Again, now here the point is, You talk about only the most important educational and work experiences. In the sense, you don't have to write every project uh, that you have done or every little internship that you have participated in. If it's not relevant, don't have to include it in the SOP. Your resume will talk about all your projects. Uh, every internship or every work experience can come in the resume or CV or whatever it is. But your SOP should be focused. I mean, the reader does not, as I said earlier, the SOP need not be a prose version of your resume. So the SOP should be a more focused statement. We're talking about relevant project. Now, if yes, most of the projects that you have done are relevant, you could write about them. I'm not saying that you should definitely omit something just because you don't want to keep everything in the SOP and resume. But if some projects are not really relevant to the program that you're applying to, or some of the work, maybe an internship that you did was maybe in a sales and marketing thing, and probably now you are applying for a Masters in Mechanical Engineering program, you don't have to really mention that internship in the SOP. Unless you really don't have any other content to write, you can maybe write about that internship and then talk about the lateral skills or some cross functional skills that you develop. But if you have enough content about projects and relevant internships and work experience, you don't have to bring in non-relevant stuff. Okay. One important thing is that the SOP should be focused on you and not the project, right? Now, many times students try to glorify the organization that they work for, or the project, or the professors that they work for, probably. That really doesn't count so much. It is okay, yes, maybe you worked in a big organization, a big company, and all that. Yeah, probably good. But then, what did you do there? What the university or the readers of the SOP want to know is what has been your contribution at that project and at that work, rather than what the project was about. Because see, you're not at a stage where you are actually defining the project, right? You are going to be a part of that project. So yeah, someone took up that project, some organization took up that project, or maybe if it's, I mean, especially if it's a mm, project that you have done outside work, outside college kind of thing, right? So if you're doing it in a company or in an organization, obviously that was something that was decided by someone else, and you are just going to be a small part of it. So keep it focused on you rather than going into too many details of the project or the technical details of it. Uh, the reader is more interested in what has been your contribution rather than what the project was all about. So this should be the highlight of what should you should write in the SOP. After reading the SOP, the reader should understand what is unique about you. I mean, this should be the entire focus. What makes you unique? I mean, to give you an example, there are many students who are applying, right? Whether you, for example, you are applying, there is maybe your classmates who are applying, there are people working, if you're working, then people working in the same company are applying, people working in different organizations are also applying. Now, just because probably you worked in Infosys, someone worked in TCS, someone worked in some other company, doesn't really make you stand out, right? So there is someone who, I mean, there would be many other students who have similar profiles. Someone with a background in electronics engineering, someone with a background in computer science, but all are applying to maybe a similar program, right? Uh, you might have done it from XYZ university, someone at another university. So again, if the university, maybe the university makes a slight 2% difference, but then that is already known from your resume and the transcripts. In the SOP, you have to talk about what makes you unique. So if you're talking about a project, maybe a college project, right? What was your specific contributions? What was the impact that you did? Because see, everybody in college does a project, right? That is mandatory. Most of the students, you work on projects, you work on internships. That is not something unique that only you did. So maybe in a class where probably uh, if you are a high school student, like, then nobody works on a project. So they're just working on a project is great. But at a college level, doing a project is almost mandatory in almost all universities in India now. So saying that okay, you worked on a project and then going and describing that project in detail really doesn't serve the purpose. You have to talk about what was your contribution, what was the impact that you created. Say for example, if you are talking about a project that maybe for example, talks about character recognition. Now there are thousands of projects that talk about character recognition using AI and machine learning models that are there on the internet. How was yours better? Right. Also, it is not about just how are yours better, how was your project better, because it is quite possible that there are better projects out there than what you have done. But what faculty and the university people need to understand, or what are they are interested in, is how good are you at problem solving. That is a very important factor that most students miss out, because they only talk of what the project was or what was done, and what students also try to emphasize a lot on what technologies were used in that project. But often you will find that students don't write a lot about what were the problems that they encountered, what challenges did they face, where all did they fail. Talking about failures is one of the best things that you can do in a SOP. But it's not just okay saying that I failed and I stopped the project. That is not what I mean by saying talking about failures. When you're saying talking about failures, talk about what problems or hurdles did you face and how did you solve them. That how did you solve them is also equally important, right? Because professors want to see whether you know how to solve problems, how to overcome challenges. Challenges could be technical challenges, maybe you some algorithm didn't work, or some design, maybe if you're doing a mechanical project, some design failed, so then you decided that okay, you would try this. So those are the kind of stories that should come out in the SOP. Okay, rather than going into too many details of what the project was about, what were the challenges, or maybe if you adopted a very unique or a novel approach, something innovative that can come out in the SOP. And most importantly, what was the impact or outcome, right? So maybe especially at work, if you're talking about that, then what was your contribution in the entire gamut of the scope of the project? What was your contributions? And then in the end you can talk about what was your learning. If you did something beyond the scope of the project, you could include that also. Maybe initially it's saying that this was the scope, I probably went ahead and did this also. Maybe that can also be part of the discussion. Okay. Yeah, Rohan. I think Rohan here has a question. I have recently, let me just read it out. Yeah, Rohan says, I have recently graduated in CS and I've done two internships, which was based on web development. I'm thinking of describing what I've done on my two major projects. One is based on distributed systems. Since the two projects I think are more significant, should I not include the internship in the SOP? See, now again, whether or not, of course, you have done your internships on web development, which are still related to CS. Now, unless you are very specifically talking, now there are two ways to approach this. One is, of course, you talk about your internship if you are applying for a general CS program. But if in the SOP you are trying to say that your interest in pursuing your masters is to get into distributed systems only, and that is why that is what as the reason you are citing as your reason for pursuing your masters, then you need not write about your internships too much in detail. Maybe one small paragraph where you cover both the internships, and rather than going into the details of what the internships were, you could just probably talk about what skills you learned by working on those internships, and maybe a sentence on how those skills could be important or useful while pursuing your masters, right? But if you're talking of applying for a general CS program where you're not stating very saying that you have multiple interests, say one is distributed computing, one is say web development or software engineering kind of thing, then maybe that web development internship can also be important. Any more question on this, Rohan? Okay. Any other questions from anybody else? Okay, let's move on. Moving on, once, I mean, beyond that, as I said, you will have to talk about why do you want to pursue a master's, why now, uh, and what value. Now, again, the why now and the what value can you add. Okay, uh, always may not be applicable to everybody, uh, and you might want to skip that also. So, if you think what value can you add, if you can write about it, great. I mean, what skills or what qualities would you bring to the program? You can write about it. The why now especially is more relevant for people who have experience and then are going back to college or going back to a master's program, which you could have done immediately after college, right? Some programs require experience, right? Or not require, sometimes they prefer experience. So in that case, the why now is quite understandable, that okay, you graduated, you worked for a couple of years, and then now you decided to go back to the program. But sometimes, some programs don't require that experience. You could have probably, most masters are okay, especially I mean, business programs, some of them require experience, others don't. But if you're applying for a program that really doesn't require any experience, and but you still have 2 or 3 years of experience, sometimes you might be able to address that issue on why now. Why after working for 3 years have you decided to go back to college and do a master's degree in computer science? Or something like that, whatever it is. So that why now part can be addressed. In some cases, again, depending on your profile, if it's not, you think it's not relevant, then you need not write about it. Again, what value can you add? If you can write about it, great. It is always a good thing to do. But sometimes, if you don't have anything really strong to write about, you can skip that part also. But the why masters and why this university is something that you should definitely include in the SOP. At least one paragraph on that. And again, why masters is talking about the skills you want to acquire. If you have already covered your career goals and aspirations in the beginning of the SOP, you need not address it here at the end of it or towards the end of later part of the SOP. You could probably use that as, I mean, you could just maybe have a reference saying that, as discussed earlier, my goals are so and so, and to acquire the, I mean, to achieve those goals, I need to develop skills in so and so domains. And then you talk about why the why this particular university, and how do you think that the various facilities and the faculty, coursework, other projects that the university offers would help you achieve those goals. If you haven't discussed your goals in the earlier part of the SOP, you could probably use this time to, I mean, maybe after you talk about why you want to pursue your masters, what aspects of your, I mean, work, project, and all are relevant. You could then maybe come to the point where you talk about why do you want to do a masters at this point, and maybe there you could talk about your future career goals. Okay, and then definitely the why university part can come there. So moving on, these are the general guidelines. Now, again, uh, as I said, the SOP is not your life story. You don't have to tell everything about what you have done since childhood and all that in the SOP. Keep the SOP focused on what you have done during your college time. I mean, when I say your undergrad time. Post that, if you have been working, again, now there are certain cases where you need not even talk about your college days. For example, if you are someone who probably has worked, has a degree in, say, a bachelor's degree, has worked for 4 years, 3 4 years, and now is applying for a business related program, right? So say for example, if you are applying for a finance degree, you maybe have an engineering degree, and now you have worked for 4 years in the banking or financial technologies industry, and now want to apply for a master's in finance, right? There maybe your engineering degree may not be really relevant. Yes, of course, yes, your mathematics and quantitative aptitude that you developed during your bachelor's is good, but the major focus could be on your work experience. So you need not even talk about a single project or internship or anything that you did during your bachelor's. You could probably just have a sentence towards the end, or maybe somewhere in it, saying that the quantitative aptitude that you developed during your bachelor's as part of an engineering curriculum will definitely help you, or maybe an augmented skill that it is going to help you in your master's and your career beyond. That can be one sentence that you could add. So you need not. So then the focus would be completely on your work experience only. Maybe you work for 3 years, 2 years in the finance domain, and that is what has made you realize that you need a master's degree in finance or something similar, and that is why you want to do a master's degree. So not everything. So as I said, not every academic activity or work-related activity has to come in the SOP. Just because everybody else is writing about their academic projects in the SOP does not mean you should also write. If you are, as I said, if what you have done is not relevant to the masters that you are applying to, don't write it. There are no rights and wrongs in the SOP. Keep it focused and keep it relevant. That is all I would say. Everything need not be described in a chronological order, right? You need not start with about maybe your college project, then you come to the work. If you think the work experience is more important, start with your work experience. It could be a mix and match, right? It could be maybe some projects in your, you could start off with the most important project in your academic thing, talk about your work, and then maybe later come to the point where you talk about the other still significant but not really the most important projects in your academic or work history. So it need not be that okay, yeah, I did this, then I did this, and then I did this. It could be I did a lot of things, and these are in the order of importance, right? So that could be also. I generally say avoid generic content, and I always insist on that. Try to keep, I mean, do not write maybe one sentence here and there is fine to bring in context sometimes, but not don't waste too much words on writing generic stuff. All right. So, and when I said don't write a whole paragraph on what technology is or what are the advancements in finance and all those kind of things, or like how knowledge of engineering and management can help you build a career in engineering management, is not really very irrelevant, because as I said, the readers of the SOP know that, and they know that better than you. Again, avoiding quotes is something that I generally tell. Unless you really can weave your complete SOP around the philosophy that you are trying to preach as part of that quote. In the sense, if you're trying to preach something in the quote, you will also have to say how you have imbibed those principles in every aspect of your maybe the projects or the work or anything, so if maybe you're talking about some philosopher's quote, it is not, don't use them as ornaments. Like many people just say okay, they just put a quote at the start, and that quote has got nothing to do with the rest of the SOP. So it's like I said, in the magazine article all those look nice, but in a SOP for a master's degree those things really don't matter, right? So if you're talking about say something what someone said, right? It could be a maybe a someone like Bill Gates said, or whoever said. If you have not used those principles or used those concepts in your day-to-day activities, in the sense in your projects or at work, then it doesn't really make sense. But if you think you can weave that entire quote, the philosophy from that quote in your entire SOP in all your activities, or at least most of them, then that can make a great story, and then that quote would also be relevant at the start. But that is a little difficult to do often, because most of the times, I mean, you write your most of the students, in fact all of them, actually they write the SOP in retrospect, in the sense you haven't really thought of that quote at that point. So had you thought of that quote at the start of the engineering program or your bachelor's program, and then you thought okay, this is how I would like to lead my life, and then you've actually done that, you mostly haven't, right? You are thinking of that code because now you have started to write an SOP. So everything is more in, you're like going back in time and thinking, okay, I did this and all that. But at that point, that code was never relevant to you. Maybe you read it, but you never thought you will live your life by that principle. So bringing in that, weaving in that philosophy in the entire SOP becomes a little difficult. Extracurriculars also, maybe sometimes you may avoid if they are not really relevant, or they are not really does not really apply to the program. For example, your resume can talk about your extracurriculars, and they should. But in the SOP, like again, if you're applying for a mechanical engineering program and your extracurriculars are maybe playing a sport or maybe participating in some arts and cultural activities, they are good, but they need not come in the SOP. It's because, as I said, the readers will also be having your copy of your resume. So you don't have to really tell them in the SOP that I did this also. And as far as the length of the SOP goes, now again, 700 to 1000 words is generally a guideline that I tell students. But again, on a case to case basis, it can be less, it can be more. Again, as I said, there is no strict rules unless the university, in some university applications set word limits, that okay, the SOP should be 500 words, 1000 words, or something like that. Exceeding those limits by say maybe maximum 5 to 10% is okay. If there are no word limits, keeping it around 1,000 words is good. But again, if you really have done a lot of activities and you want to extend it to maybe even 1,300, 1,400 words, it is still okay. I mean, there is no strict rule that, okay, just because it is, I've written here 1,700 to 1,000, you should keep it 1,000. Again, it is on a case to case basis. But if you can compile your entire story in 1,000 words, that is always a good thing to do. I think someone here has a question. Mm. Yeah. Akash has a question. Thank you for having me here. So I've completed my. I will have completed graduation in May 2025. What type of stuff, project case studies would be more impactful and relevant, especially for business analytics, which make my SOP identical, additional skills and certificates. So see now, since Akash, just a quick follow-up question here. What is your bachelor's degree in? I mean, what are you currently studying that? So I understand you want to apply for a program in business analytics, but what is your bachelor's degree in? Okay, so since you are doing a bachelor's degree in computer science, right? Now, if you have done projects or any internships that are related to analytics, those should get priority in your SOP. I mean, you talked about them first. If you have not, right, it's quite possible that you haven't done, then maybe you will have to talk about how did you develop an interest in analytics. And then what, I mean, of course, computer science, as a computer science student, I'm sure you must have developed a lot of skills, especially in programming, data structures, data science, machine learning, and all. uh, they are all relevant to analytics. I mean, as an analytics engineer, having those skills, I mean, analytics is, I would still say, maybe an application of computer science. Of course, now it has kind of grown so big that it has branched out into a separate domain itself. But you can always bring out skills that you have probably, or the things that you have learned as part of your projects. And talking about your computing skills, Python programming, maybe data science related skills, or anything to do with data, I would say, would be good skills that you could talk about in your SOP, which could make it still a relevant, which would sound that you are still a relevant applicant for a Masters in Business Analytics program. Yes, again, you have also asked about certifications. Yes, if you have done certifications which are again relevant to analytics or something that would help you in the analytics programs, you could talk about those as well. If you haven't done, uh, now again, you could do that. You could probably take up some certifications, not just from the point of writing an SOP or working on the applications, but even eventually when you start the program, if you think that that knowledge is going to help you, uh, that would also be a good thing. Yeah, and as Josna said, if you have good grades in mathematics, you could highlight those as well in your SOP, because that is again a skill that, I mean, having good grades in mathematics, statistics related courses would really help you in your analytics masters. Okay. Quickly we'll talk about LORs, letters of recommendations. But till then, any questions so far, or maybe after this? This is, I think, the last slide that I have on LOR. With the LORs, I thought I'll just keep it one slide, and maybe we'll focus more on the SOP. But any questions so far on the SOP, or maybe if you have anything on the LORs also, we can maybe discuss after the slide is over. Okay. Again, when you write about when now ideally a letter of recommendation is supposed to be written by the faculty or the manager at work or whoever it is, but often it so happens that the recommenders ask you to give them some pointers or some content to work on, because it's quite possible that they don't remember you that well, or they are not really familiar about the process of writing the LORs, or sometimes they are just too busy or lazy or whatever it is, right? So if you are asked by your recommenders to give them some drafts or some kind of guidelines on the for pointers for the for the LORs. Now remember that the LOR is again not a validation of everything that you have done in college or everything that you have done at work, right? a faculty need not write about all your other activities, like all the extracurriculars, all the academic activities that you've done need not come in each and every LOR. So nobody is going to use your LOR as a validation. Like say, okay, you have written this in the resume. Is the recommender also talking about the same things? Those things really doesn't. That is not how a LOR is supposed to be. The LOR should talk about, okay, what has been, I mean, the idea of getting an LOR from a recommend from a student is to understand what kind of a student you are. What are your qualities, whether you are a problem solver, whether you have faced any difficulties and have you overcome them. Those kind of aspects they are looking at. They are not really looking at using the LOR as to verify whether you whatever you're saying in the resume is true, and okay, yes, the college has given or the professor has given a certificate saying that yes, this is what the student has done, right? So the in the LOR, try to talk about what qualities have you developed, or what qualities do you have, what makes you unique, what kind of a student you are. Again, if your academics are not that great or haven't been that great, don't talk too much about your academic proficiency in the LOR. I mean, that may not always correlate, right? You're saying that you are the most brilliant student in class, you are always among the top 5%. But when someone looks at your transcripts, your GPA says that you are not really in the top 25% also, right? So if that is the case, then don't talk about too much about the academic stuff if your academics are not great. You could talk about what challenges you faced. Again, stories of failure always make good content for both the SOP and LORs. But it's not just saying that he failed and gave up or she failed and gave up. She failed, and how did what else did she do to or he do to overcome those failures is something that should definitely come in the LOR if you're talking about a failure story. You can mention drawbacks in the LOR, but if you do that, if a professor does that, it is always good to talk about what steps have you taken to overcome those drawbacks. If there aren't any steps that you have taken, then it is best that you and the professors just avoid those drawbacks thing, part of it. And again, the LORs need not be too long. About 300 to 400 words is good enough, as long as you keep it short, sweet, and relevant. Okay, so this is what I have about LORs. Any questions that you have about LORs or SOPs or anything in general, we can take that. Okay, so as I said earlier, if you, I can share that, what do you say, the ebook that I have with you. I can put it on the group. Also, for if someone is there, so there's a WhatsApp group. I'm not sure if everybody here is on that WhatsApp group or not. But in case you are not, maybe just message me. I'll send you the link to join the WhatsApp group. Do invite your friends and others to be on that group also, so that for the next future webinars or any events that we do, they would also get intimated, because otherwise it's very difficult to spread the word around. If you can share it with your friends, that will be great. uh, any questions so far, or it's almost 12:30, so it's almost an hour that we started, and we can conclude this session if there are no more questions here. No questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, then we will I think I don't think there is any slide beyond that. No, there is nothing here, so we will then conclude our discussion for SOPs and LORs today, and we will hopefully catch up for some more future webinars that we do. Thank you all for joining, and goodbye.